All right, Big 12.
Yep.
Starting alphabetical order as we have been. Mike, tell me your thoughts on Baylor.
All right. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but follow me. Um,
I'm ready. I'm to rock and roll.
I'm going to credit from the beginning. Titus and Tate, great college basketball podcast. For those of you out there, if you don't listen, follow them. They're very good. But they have a college. They have a basketball Twitter system for ranking players. There's a hierarchy right at the bottom. The first question you have to ask is, does he have the dog in him? Um, is there the dog in him? Everybody's seen the memes, the little dog in the chest. Does he have the
Of
dog?
course.
Once we know you have the dog in you, you're a dog, then we can graduate. You can graduate into possibly being one of them ones. Now, if you're one of them ones, you're in elite company because you're one of them ones. There's only a handful of guys. They have to have the dog in them, and they could be one of them ones. And then from one of them ones, only one or only a smaller subsection of them ones can be him. So you have dog, one of them ones, and then him.
Okay. And what you're telling me is
What I'm telling you is, I think Dave Aranda is one of them ones, and and I am a big believer in Baylor this year. I like I said, I believe.
okay.
Not only do I
I
believe,
don't hate it.
not only do I believe that Dave Aranda is one of them ones, but I believe Blake Shapen has that dog in him. And when you combine a head coach that might be one of them ones with a player who has the dog in him at quarterback, returning a top five, power five offensive line, they lost a lot on the edges. They did. I think that's the big drawback for their team this year is that they lost, I think, 3 draft picks on both sides of the ball at receiver and in the secondary.
Yes.
But with an offensive line returning like that, and the way that Blake Shapen played in the last 2 games of the season, and particularly against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game, stepping into a spot like that, starting and winning that game. Sorry, they did. Oklahoma State won that game, or no, Baylor did. They made the stop at the end, right?
They did.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think I'm remembering that right. I could not be
Yes.
remembering right.
But with Baylor playing well in that game, Shapen's the real deal. I think Jeff Grimes is a great offensive coordinator. I think Dave Aranda is a great head coach. I'm kind of shocked he didn't move on from Baylor this offseason. But I think that kind of speaks to the kind of guy he is. I love Baylor over 7.5. Love it. I think they're the second best team in the Big 12. Even on paper, I think behind Oklahoma, and I think they're really going to contend for a Big 12 title this year. I think it would take OU really taking a step back in order for them to win the Big 12, but I don't think it's out of the mix. I take hammer Baylor over 7.5, and you may want to sprinkle the money line there for them as a Big 12 winner, just because I think they're going to be really good. It's much easier to place guys on the outside than the inside, and both lines for Baylor are going to be outstanding. Love Baylor's over.
I do like Baylor as well. I think, I mean, I'm not going out on a limb here, but Baylor shocked the Big 12 last year coming out on
Yeah,
top.
they were 80-1 to start the year.
Yep. And you know, they got some play callers that know what they're doing in Jeff Grimes on the offense. Blake Shapen is going to go as high as Baylor's going to go as high as Blake can take the team, but I don't think that it's such a strong schedule that Baylor's going to struggle. They don't play OU until November, late November. So they'll have time to get the Greers going. They'll have time to kind of set everything up. There's a little bit of a difficult schedule before their bye week on the 8th of October that week. But aside from playing Texas, the last game of the season, Texas Tech and Oklahoma, like back-to-back in October, November, I don't think Baylor really struggles to continue. Even if they don't have like the most star-studded cast of all time, I still think the Bears rank probably top 15 by the end of the season at worst. I think that's the floor, and I think the ceiling really can be Big 12 championship if OU loses a step and I kind of concur. I'm not going to bet the over just yet on Baylor, but I do think they're going to come out pretty strong contenders.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of meh in the Big 12, and
I would agree with that.
they are well above the meh. Um, yeah, I think they're going to be very good. I think Blake Shapen's a really good quarterback, and their offensive line is outstanding. Um, I look for a lot of the same from Baylor this year.
I agree, and they're fun to watch. They're just a fun
Yeah.
team to watch. Moving on to Iowa State. What are we thinking, Iowa State?
This is a team I see taking a step back, and
Agreed.
they are going to be right around bowl contention, somewhere in that one game over, one game under, or right at 500. I think Matt Campbell's a good coach. I think it's just tough to overcome the recruiting deficit they're at Iowa State, and when you have to replace your starting quarterback, running back, and one of the best tight ends in college football all in the same year, you're bound to have a year that's not going to live up to expectations. I don't take it as an indictment against Matt Campbell. I just think that there's too much of a talent exodus to overcome. I think bowl or 7-5 should be happy for Iowa State. If they can knock off an Iowa and get another big win somewhere on the schedule, and you go 7-5, I think that's a perfectly good season for a guy who's really reloading this year.
So I am down on Iowa this year. I think you lose several offensive playmakers, including Brock Purdy, to the NFL. So now you're relying on Hunter Deckers, who's got, I think his passer rating was something like 45 in 2021. So it just doesn't cut the mustard. And then if you look at the strength of schedule, they have a couple tough games back to back. You have Ohio, then Baylor, both at home. So that's to start weeks 3 and 4 of your season. Then you have Texas.
That's coming off a road Cyhawk game.
Yep. And then you're at Texas. Then you have a bye, and then you're at Oklahoma, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and TCU. That's their schedule. Yeah. And it's like I just struggle to see Matt Campbell pulling that team together for – I don't think they get 6 wins. I think they don't make a bowl game. I think that is the floor, and I think they will reach the floor. I am very much leaning the under on Iowa State because I think their over-under is 6 or 7 wins. I just don't think – I don't think it's really indicative of any, like, program issues. I just think this is a step-back year for
Yeah. I'm not touching the over-under. Vegas Insider has it at 6.5. I would stay away from it. I think 6-6 would be a perfectly fine season.
Kansas Jayhawks.
Congratulations on winning a college basketball national championship, as sad as that is to say, because that was a real heartbreaker as a Carolina fan, especially coming off of ending Mike K's career. He's no longer coach. Coach is the dog. Mike is just Mike. Shout out to Tate Frazier.
I was going to say, luckily they're a basketball school because they're not going to get 3 wins this year.
No, yeah, they're not.
Kansas State. Good news for fans of the state of Kansas is that I think Kansas State will be a pretty decent program. They have a pretty mean rushing attack. Defense is pretty good. It's there. It's not the worst. Their weaknesses are at quarterback and their receiving core, but I don't see them not pulling out 6 wins and going to a bowl game. I don't think they're doing any better than that. I think bowl game is kind of the ceiling. The floor is not making a bowl game. I think Kansas is very like average college football program and an average Big 12 program. They're going to have some tough weeks. They have Oklahoma, Texas Tech, and Iowa weeks 4 through 6. So I don't see them pulling out a single win. Maybe Iowa, maybe in those kind of 3 weeks. But it's very possible that they roll into the season 4-0 because they play South Dakota, Missouri, Tulane. Not bad teams by any means, but if they can overcome Missouri, I think they can. We'll see, kind of thing. But it wouldn't shock me if they get hot to start out and then they hit like a wall weeks 4 to 6, and then they're just average after that.
Yeah, I would say on K-State, they're somewhat of a popular sleeper pick because of Deuce Vaughn and Martinez, and then the defense is going to be pretty good, especially up front. So I think they're in the meh. They're in the meh of the Big 12, which is mostly meh. And when I say the mostly meh, I mean like between Baylor, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas State, Iowa State, and West Virginia are all somewhere around 6 to 8 wins projected, somewhere in there. That's a lot of meh. I think that K State this year will be in the upper crust of that. I think they're over under 6.5. If you put a gun to my head, I would take the over. I think they'll be a little bit better than advertised, but I think I think top half of the Big 12 not going to be competing for a Big 12 title. I think they'll be fine. They'll be fine. Let's go with that. They will be a fine team.
They will be a fine program.
Yes.
Oklahoma. Are the Sooners back? Are the Sooners in playoff contention in your mind? Are they one of the top 4 programs in the nation? Yes or no? Gun to your head.
No.
Okay.
But I think the two questions you just asked are two very different questions.
Okay.
Are they in contention for the playoff? Yes. Are they one of the top 4 teams in the country? I think the answer to that is a resounding no. I think really, could they be? Yes. Because if the Jeff Lebby, Dylan Gabriel tag team works the way that everybody at Oklahoma wants it to work, and they find another receiver or two, they're going to be really good. Because you know Venables is going to come in. Their defense will be better than it has been in recent years. Correct. Mims is a legit one.
And Dylan Gabriel is a very, very good quarterback. So we didn't see that in last year in 21 where he played for UCF, but he had a collarbone fracture that took him out for most of the season. But if his numbers kind of continue from where they were in 2020, it's very possible that he kind of surprises a lot of people at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Granted, Oklahoma fans usually very full of themselves on how well they'll do, but I think they'll surprise some people.
Yeah, I do think they get back to the top. I just everything has to come together. That connection's got to hit, and what Brent Venables has to be able to implement a system right away on defense and get the most out of the guys that they're bringing in through the transfer portal. And they lost a lot. Yeah. So I think they're the best team in the Big 12. I don't think that's a debate. I think whether or not they're in contention for the college football playoff, I think really depends on. I say they are in contention, but I don't think they get there, and it's tough because I think the 4th team into the playoff this year either comes. I think it comes out of the Pac-12, to be honest, and we'll get there. But I think Oklahoma is going to slip up at least twice, and I think that's enough for somebody else to come in. I think they still win the conference, but I think they slip up at least twice. I wouldn't touch the team total. I would leave it alone, but I don't think they make the playoff. I think they win the Big 12.
I agree. So I think what the most difficult thing, right, is Oklahoma as a program lost so many people, not just from players, but from coaching staff, right? Yeah. So Brent Venables has to come in. He has to have this established crew of staff and roster that is a complete turnover. I just think that's too difficult. Granted, I think he'll win the Big 12. I think he'll come out on top, but I think strength of schedule wise, it's not there to propel OU maybe to the top 4, and even if they were to be a 1-loss team. Yeah. And I just don't see them coming together. I think they have a tough enough schedule where they're going to fall 2 games to teams that Sooners fans are going to say they shouldn't, but reality is that they very well may just be outplayed or out coached. Yeah. And that's not to say Venables is bad. It's very hard to get a staff going like within 6 months, especially with the turmoil of how that kind of turned out at Oklahoma last year as well.
Yeah, it's a lot to overcome and make the playoff this year. I think they're in good shape going forward. It's just I think first year 10-2 Big 12 championship, New Year's Six bowl would be a very good season.
Yeah, I think that's the ceiling. I don't see them in the playoffs. Oklahoma State notes.
I am down on Oklahoma State when compared to Baylor, and I think
Okay,
that's the way
that's a
that I
fair
look.
comparison. That's a fair way to compare them.
Yeah, and that's the way I kind of looked at Oklahoma State and Baylor, because I think everybody looks at, when you look at the Big 12, you look at Oklahoma and Texas, and I looked at Oklahoma State and Baylor as the two teams that played in last year's championship game. Both teams lost a ton
Yes.
on the defensive side of the ball, um, and you you could argue that Oklahoma State is a more experienced quarterback. I don't think they have the better quarterback between Oklahoma and Baylor. And I think Baylor reloads easier. I trust Dave Aranda as a higher ceiling coach. Mike Gundy's a good coach. He's been for years. There's no debating that Mike Gundy can get it done with the guys he's got. I think losing Jeff Knowles is a big loss for them as
Yep.
the defensive coordinator. I think they lost a lot of leaders, not just players, but a lot of leaders off of that defense that was so good last year. And I think the gusto that they played with is going to be hard to replicate. So I am not touching the team total. I think they come in fourth in the Big 12. I think they're the next best team behind Baylor, Texas. They may even be third. They may be better than Texas. Um, but I think they're just a step behind Baylor and Oklahoma. And
I would agree. My first major note is I love Mike Gundy. The second is I don't know if they're going to perform admirably or have a huge regression this year. I think there's just too many question marks. What I will say for betting fans, so they have a gauntlet of a schedule this year. So not just in who they play, but what their schedule looks like. They have a bye week on the 24th of September, and then they play every week until the end of the regular season. So if you have guys that get hurt or guys that need a break like midway through the season, Oklahoma State's not going to get it, right? So they're going I think they play something like 9 or 10 weeks in a row. Something
yeah,
very very high. And that's just hard to overcome regardless of the turnover and the fact that you have so much turnover and that they're playing a
it's
pretty good
nine.
schedule is tough.
Yeah, it's 9 in a row, 5 on the road with no consecutive home games. That's
I mean
hard.
that's fucking brutal. That is a
Yeah,
brutal schedule. Maybe Sanders improves enough where like we're eating crow, but I don't see it.
yeah. I don't think
I
so.
don't see it. How about TCU? You big on TCU?
Um, I this is again they're in the meh. I think that people are high on them
I
because
think they're worse than meh.
they might be. I like. Here's the thing. Sonny Dykes is the right guy to take the program over. He did really well at SMU. I think, but that doesn't change what they're going to do this year. I think people are high on them because they look at week one. They say they're going to Colorado. They're a 6.5 point favorite. Colorado is awful. We'll get to that in the Big
Colorado's a
12.
terrible team. Colorado's
Yes.
not a good ball team.
So why TCU is only a 6.5 point favorite doesn't make sense to anybody. So when you start looking at the rest of their schedule, you go, TCU can make some noise here. I don't think they can. I think they're in that band with West Virginia and Texas Tech and K State and those teams right at the 6 win mark, 6 to 7 wins. And there's going to be a handful of coin flip games that are going to decide that. They don't have a quarterback to speak of. They're a couple years away. If you're looking for somebody to watch, Quentin Johnson is going to be electric. The dude is a Calvin Johnson type athlete.
Yeah, he's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and so if you're looking at what to pay attention to at TCU, it's going to be Quentin Johnson, but otherwise they're going to be a middle of the road team. Maybe bottom half of the Big 12.
I was gonna say I think they're a little bottom half kind of types because their defense is not good. The defense is not good, and it's a really bad sign when you come out of spring training and kind of those spring games, and you have no idea who your quarterback's going to be. Like that's always a red flag for me when it's not. No, these are two elite guys. It's these two are so average that neither is outperforming the other. So between Max Dugan and Chandler Morris, like they're still battling it out for QB1. It's like the front seven of TCU is not great. Their defense is terrible. They have a decent running game, but obviously, if they're still fighting over who's going to be quarterback, it's not going to end up well. So I don't think TCU makes a bowl game this year. I think you see them at about 5 wins, and I don't think that's.
No, I think that's right.
I could eat crow on that. I could be totally wrong, but I don't see them coming out on top.
Yeah, they were 103rd in pressure rate last year and 123rd in third downs converted against last year.
Woof.
And they didn't get They didn't. Yeah, that's out of 131 FBS programs, and they didn't get measurably better.
Yeah.
It's not good.
It's not good. Staying in the state of Texas.
With Texas. Everybody's most interesting team in the Big 12.
Do you hear the train? Do you hear the train rolling down the track? The hype train.
The Texas is back train.
My guy, the hype train has left the station, and there is no stopping it until week 2 when they play Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. It's until week 2 when they get their doors blown off by Alabama at home.
I want to hear what you have to say about Texas because I have some strong words, and I'm going to upset some people in the state of Texas, and that's fine.
Yeah. They need guys up front. They don't have an offensive line, and their defense didn't play with any gusto last year. And they're going to have some of the most electric playmakers in the country across the board. They have maybe the best running back in the country, Bijan Robinson. They're like 5 or 6 deep at wideout with just studs. They had 2 good receivers last year in Xavier Worthy and what's the other? Jordan Whittingham or Jordan Whittington. And then they got Billingsley and Hall from Alabama, and then they have 2 5-stars behind them. So they're 6 deep at wide receiver, and on top of Bijan Robinson, they have Rashawn Johnson. They are loaded at the skill positions, but they can't block anybody.
No, they cannot.
And you're going to see that when Will Anderson eats Quinn Ewers' lunch 7 times in week 2, and you're going to realize that this team is just a piece away from being a Big 12 contender, playoff contender, but that piece is all 5 offensive line spots. Yeah, not high. I'm not high on their chances to win the Big 12. I think 9-3 would be a good year for Texas. I think somewhere between 7-5 and 8-4. I think 8-4 should be the floor for Texas fans' expectations if they're tempering it. I think 9-3 would be a good year for them. So if you're looking at I think their total's 8.5. Which, yeah, it's 8.5. I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed if I were a Texas fan and they went 8-4 if I was being realistic, but Texas fans aren't realistic. So
no,
they're going to be I think 8-4. I wouldn't touch the total, but those are my thoughts. They are an offensive line away from being legit, regardless of what they do on defense. And without the offensive line holding up, they're going to get outgunned in a few games this year.
I don't understand the hype behind Quinn Ewers. I get it. Maybe I'm not seeing something, and maybe he really is that good, but he played 2 snaps last year. And so, to say that it's proven is certainly not there. And here's the problem. If you have a new quarterback who hasn't played really in college football, which is the case with Ewers, right? And you have a terrible offensive line that can't block anybody, his morale is going to plummet. It doesn't matter how many good players he has in the wings and slots and a tight end. What's going to happen is he's going to get his ass beat repeatedly, and then he's going to suffer because of it. And his play style is going to change where he's going to be scrambling too much. He's not going to be staying in the pocket taking hits because he's already taken too many hits. I am betting the under on Texas this year. I don't think they were a good football team last year. I know they made some progression in who they got as far as skill positions, but I just don't see it on offense or defense. If you remember last year, Texas was getting run over on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And I think they're going to go in to play. They're going to play Alabama. Alabama is going to smack them down to the earth. And then they're going to realize, oh, shit, we made the decision to have this happen every year from now on. And I think that's going to demoralize them a little bit. I think Texas getting in a bowl game is not unrealistic, but I don't see 8 or 9 wins for Texas. I see 6 or 7. I think they are a middle of the pack, and I'm fully prepared to be totally wrong on this, but I think Texas is a very, very average football team, and I don't think they've made the steps forward that they need to in the non-skill positions that they need to be good.
Yeah,
That's my hottest take, probably, aside from the one that I'll have for the Pac-12. But I don't see Texas as being good at all.
they're definitely an incomplete team. I think that their skill position talent is too good, and I think Sark is too good an offensive coach for them to be just middle of the road. I don't think they're going to hit the ceiling that people think they're going to hit. So I think I don't necessarily disagree that the under could hit. I would say if the under hits, they go 8-4, and I think that's probably 8-4, 7-5 would I think be a disappointment for them when you look at their schedule and you look at who they play. They're going to lose. They're probably going to lose to Alabama, Oklahoma, and then they've got a bunch of games that are very winnable.
Yeah, very
They
winnable,
go
but historically Texas has not won very well.
Yes, exactly. So we'll see if they can turn it around. I don't. I could see. I see what you're saying. I don't necessarily think that's too hot a take. I
Let
just
me
think
pose
that.
this question: do you think Texas is ranked in the top 25 at the end of the year? Yes or no?
Oh,
Because I'm saying decidedly no. I don't think they come into the
I
conversation.
I think they'll be if they're ranked. They're in the 20s. I think they. I think they could be. I think they'll. I think they'll be 20 to 30. Let me put it that way.
Okay,
I think they'll be in that band. I
that's
think
not.
there's
It's not an awful take. It's just
no. I think there's too many SEC teams that are going to get put ahead of them to where they'll be any
well,
higher than that, even if
I
they go
wonder
nine
so.
and three. So I think at 9-3, if they max out potential and they go 9-3 or even 10-2, they're at the bottom half of the top 25. And if they're 8-4, 7-5, I think they're one of the better 8-4, 7-5 teams in the country. So that's why I think 20 to 30.
Okay, staying in Texas, Texas Tech. Thoughts?
More meh. It's just
I mean,
more meh.
more below Matt to me. I don't see
Yeah,
Texas Tech
exactly.
getting six
Joey
wins.
McGuire. Joey McGuire's jumping from high school to college. They don't have a quarterback at all. They're they are
Well,
going to start
they have
recruiting.
Tyler So. I'm going to butcher
Yeah,
that
who
last name.
failed at Oregon? Like
Yeah, I mean, he's a terrible decision maker as a play caller.
yeah,
I
they
mean,
just
that's the problem.
yeah they get Houston at home, which is a very losable game. Then they go to NC State and back home for Texas, and then they go to Kansas State and Oklahoma State. That's after Murray State to start the year. That's weeks 2 through 6, right? 2, 3, 4,
Yeah,
5, 6. Yeah, they could be. They
they could be one and
legitimately
five.
could be. Yeah, 1-5 going into the bye week.
And they don't have. So I mean, Texas Tech never had the defense, but this Texas Tech team is not scoring 50, 60 points
No.
like they would to beat Texas. Circa
Yeah, and
circa
I think that there's hyper because
2017, 16,
there's
whatever it was.
hyper on Texas Tech because they hired Joey McGuire and they brought in who's their offense coordinator. Zach Kitley has gotten a lot of buzz from West Virginia or Western Kentucky, where he turned Bailey Zappi into Bailey Zappi. But is Kyle? You still need a guy, and Tyler Show is not that guy. And so, yeah, I think if the team total's 5.5, and you made me bet it, I'd take the under. Yeah, it's 5.5. I'd take the under. I don't believe in them at all. Stay away from that total. I have no idea what they're going to be.
Yeah, I don't expect anything from Texas Tech. Sorry, Texas Tech fans. All right, finally, last team in the Big 12, West Virginia. What do you think?
I think out of the bottom half of the meh in the Big 12, this is the team that has the chance to jump into the top half of the meh.
Yes.
And I only say that because of JT Daniels. Um,
I'm very high on JT Daniels. I actually think West Virginia could be somewhat of a good team, upwards of 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah, they have. Neil Brown's recruiting well. They have a good offensive line. JT Daniels is a legit quarterback. We know that he can play. He got hurt, and Stetson Bennett never really lost that job. It's not that JT
It
Daniels.
happens.
Yeah, so I think 7-5 is really realistic for West Virginia. I could even see 8-4 if things go their way. I'm a believer in West Virginia. I'm not going to bet the team total because they could just be middle of the road. Their team total is only 5.5, so that might be worth laying
I'm
on, but
leaning on that over. I just haven't kind of decided because they do have a tough schedule. West Virginia is not the college football season will not be kind to
yeah,
them. They're at Pittsburgh to start. Granted, they have Kansas and Townsend at home, but then they're at Virginia Tech, at Texas. Then they play Baylor at home. Then they have Texas Tech away.
yeah,
TCU, who we discussed already, is meh. So
yeah.
maybe if they can show out in the games against the other meh teams, like that's one thing. But there's definitely some really tough games there. Pittsburgh to start out, Texas. They're away for all these tough games too. They're at Pittsburgh, at Texas
Yeah,
in October. Oklahoma comes to them, but good luck, West Virginia on November 12th. You know what I mean? So there's
yeah.
definitely some tough games that I could see them really losing out on. All right, so wrapping up, Mike, tell me your wagers, tell me your bets. What are we rolling with for the Big 12?
Out of here, I have one play, and that is Baylor.
I have two. I have Oklahoma the
Baylor.
big. So
Sorry,
you have
Baylor
Baylor team
over
total.
team total 7.5. Hammer.
I have. I'll probably ride with you on the team total 7.5. I have Oklahoma Big 12 winner plus 200, and I have Texas under 8 wins at plus 120. I don't again. I went on my little mini rant. I think Oklahoma is still the best team in this conference. TBD on whether they make it further. But I think good teams in the Big 12 will be fun to watch, and I think bad teams in the Big 12 will be very unfun to watch.
Yeah.
I think that's a resounding agreement.
Yep.
All right, moving on.